All right, so let's talk about what we see here. This is the two pages side by side, page 48, page 49. You can see the numbers down there. We've got a lot of stuff on here. We've got coordinates that are moving around as my mouse moves around. Page status, ready to publish. So this is like, are there any errors? What is our current zoom ratio? We can quickly proof it and see how the pages actually look. Right now, they don't have a whole lot because there's nothing on them, just page numbers. But like, if you're not quite sure how it looks here, if you're like, I think that might be weird, this is how you check it. You click that little button, and if it looks decent here, then it should look decent when it prints. Up here, you have this whole toolbar that we'll talk about in just a moment. Over here, we have the inspector, and we have contents. Up top here, we also have a few things too, like manage, edit, list, layout. These aren't so important right now. This is really what's more important. These over here can be important. So like page inspector, info about the page, which doesn't really help you that much, but layers can be useful. If you want to position some things and then you want to move to a different layer so you don't accidentally mess it up, you could put like your photos on one, or if you've got shapes that you don't want to accidentally move, you could put them on one layer and then add a new layer and work on that. So they work fairly similar to Photoshop. Working on one layer versus working on another. You can divide things across layers to keep them separate and to kind of protect and whatnot. You can also actually like hide a layer temporarily. So if I just draw some squares on here real fast, I can hide them. I can also lock them. So now I can't move these at all. If I switch layers, it's fine. But when I go back to this one, you can see the layer's locked. As soon as I put my mouse over, I can't, everything sort of disappears. So can't do anything. So that can be useful too. You can also merge layers, but I wouldn't typically merge layers. If you delete the layer, whatever's on it disappears too. You can undo, and sometimes that works, but it doesn't always. Undo has gotten a lot better, but a few years back, undo was really, really pretty bad. We've got names, which we can talk about in just a moment, and we've got errors. So this little green thing down here represents whether or not there are any errors. If we start drawing things, like these are yellow, and down here it is now yellow to match. So it's a little concerned. It's saying that stuff is close to the gutter, or that stuff is on the gutter, and stuff is close to the edge of the book. So if it's too close to the edge, depending on how it's cut, it's possible that something could get cut off, although it probably won't. But also, you typically like to have a little bit of white room, or whatever color the background is. You typically don't want text to be that close to the edge. The gutter is a bigger issue, because this is actually like the middle of the book, where it goes into the spine, and that can be problematic. If you have text in there, it will be impossible to read. So you always want text and stuff to be a little away from the gutter. You don't want it quite in there. So now it's happy. Although it does say there's an empty text area, which is fine. It'll still print, but it might not be happy about it. Now, depending on where you draw stuff, sometimes it actually does turn red. Something that is red will not print. So it is what it is. Now, worry about your design. If your design looks good the way that you have it, don't worry about the errors, because I can fix them later without actually changing your design. There are ways around it. I've done this for several years. We can fix it. So don't worry too much about your errors. But that's what that is. Names. So what names are is, let's say that we have someone on this page. Well, hopefully we have lots of people on this page. Let's say his name is Austin Williams. So when you have names on a page, pictures of people, you want to highlight their name, and you want to click this little check here, this mark name. Now it shows up here, which is cool, because when we do the index for the book, it will automatically pull all of them and put them in the index. This is also a great way to check spellings for names, make sure that we don't have anyone's name misspelled, because when we run the index, whatever we have marked will be in the index. And so if there's a name misspelled, as long as it's marked, it'll show up in the index, and we can go find it on whatever page it is and fix it. So mark your names. All right, so we kind of jumped ahead with the inspector, but that's okay, because messing with the page inspector was the first logical thing. Now let's talk about some of these tools up here. So this little thing here lets us change some of the settings. The most important one is this snaps. Right now mine is set to 6 point. If I go to pica, one pica, this will make it more obvious what it does. So if I try moving this, let's just give it a fill color and talk about this in a few minutes. If I try moving this, it kind of jumps. Do you see that? It's a little bit hard to tell here. If I zoom in, it's easier to tell. Let me zoom into 100%. See how it jumps? I can't move just a little bit. That can be beneficial because if I want to line things up nicely, it's really easy to tell if it's lined up or not. But if I want like a really smooth, like I don't want it at either spot, I want it in between, I might need to go here and change my snaps to like 1 point. So now I can really customize exactly where it is. Now on the other hand, if I want to make sure things are lined up, it's a little bit harder to do, although they do snap a little bit anyway, so it's not too bad. What else is in here? We've got rulers, so rulers can be useful. I personally like rulers. We also have preferences. You should go in here and you should play with these a little bit too. So when you're working, you want to have basically all of these. You also should have guides. So we want to use 9 columns. And I don't typically use rows, but if you're going to use rows, don't use 2. Use 3 or 5. Don't use even numbers because even numbers like divide things in half or are more likely to divide things in half, and things divided in half are gross in page layouts. Same thing for these columns. We don't want to use 6. 3 is okay because it's basically like 3 of these together. 9's okay. I'm even okay with like 5 or 7, but like even numbers, bad. You can make a grid on there if you want. So small, medium, etc. Those are kind of up to you. But I do say that you need columns. You need to at least have 3 columns, and the other stuff is sort of up to you, I suppose. Keep column spacing and row spacing at 6, so that way it's consistent. You can have rulers if you want. You don't have to have yellow if you don't want. I don't like yellow. It's too distracting. And you've got some stuff up here which can be useful, or you can hide stuff that you don't ever use, which can be nice as well.